Good morning, everyone. It's Sunday, June 23rd. It's time to go on the record. He's the keeper of the numbers at Suffolk University. What new polling by David Paleologos is telling us about the state of the 2020 presidential race.
We did it once, and now we will do it again. And this time we're going to finish the job.
President Trump confident that his bare-knuckle politics will carry him to victory again. Are there any cracks in his base? And Joe Biden's debate dilemma. Is the president or 19 other Democratic contenders his primary concern? Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Good Sunday morning to you, everyone. It is the first Sunday of summer. Welcome to On the Record. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter Janet Wu. Great to have you with us this morning. And our guest this morning is David Paleologos. He's the director of the Suffolk University Political Research Center. He is also a lecturer in Suffolk's Department of Government, teaches a course in political survey research. He is a graduate of Tufts University. And David, this week he released a new Suffolk University USA Today poll in the 2020 presidential race. So we're off and running, right?
We sure are. Joe Biden is leading 2-1, 30 to 15% over Bernie Sanders. And then there are three other candidates that I'm considering the starting five for the Democratic lineup.
In a nutshell, they are.
They're Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and Kamala Harris.
Very good, thanks.
So before we drill down on a lot of these numbers, and we're going to go back to some of that in your new poll, I want to ask you about President Trump's teams, that they are insisting that polls are meaningless today. And that's why he fired his pollsters, and that's why pollsters got it wrong in 2016. What's your answer?
Well, here's the lesson. Pollsters did not get it wrong. Number one, the Real Clear Politics average had Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote by 3%. She won by 2%. So it was well within acceptable standards. The polls that did take place in those swing states were wrong. Unfortunately, a lot of the top pollsters didn't poll those swing states. We didn't at Suffolk University, Quinnipiac, Marist. And so if you look at all of the data that Nate Silver and Charlie Cook and Larry Sabato had to aggregate the Electoral College data, they really had it based on polling that was done by second-tier pollsters in those swing states.
So as a result, you have not changed your methods of polling since 2016, and none of the big pollsters have changed their methods at all?
No. I mean, Real Clear Politics being 1% off, Suffolk's accuracy in the Northeast has been amazing. Suffolk this year just picked up some new polling partners. The Cincinnati Enquirer now is our polling partner, in addition to the Globe and USA Today, Arizona Republic, Nevada Gazette. We go on and on in terms of Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. So Suffolk's really in a great position in terms of polling partnerships.
So I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask you about the prevailing sort of sentiment among a lot of people that perhaps don't pay a lot of attention to politics, that there are a large number of people who will never answer a pollster honestly.
Sure.
Sort of like the hidden vote.
Sure.
Is that very big anymore?
Sure. I mean, people who disqualify themselves or terminate a survey doesn't mean they're not counted. I think a lot of people don't understand that. It means we have to try harder to get those demographics. It might be younger voters, it might be younger minority voters, but we keep trying. It costs us more, and it takes a little extra effort. But those pockets of demographics are not omitted or underrepresented in any way.
So to Janet's point, though, how many people maybe back in 2015 would say, well, you know, would you vote for President Trump, Donald Trump for president? And not they want to tell you they would do it, but they went in the voting booth and they did it.
Oh, sure. You know, you have a hidden, and part of the last election, we saw two different competing undecideds. We had the 5% undecided at the end of the campaign in 2016, and there was about 5% third-party voters. And we noticed in the third party and the undecided voters that they both disliked, understandably so, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. But the intensity level against Hillary Clinton was higher. And so when those people ended up rotating to the major candidates, Trump was able to win.
So let's move to 2020. and obviously we're not in the year 2020 yet. So is it fair to say the biggest takeaway right now from what the information that you have at your fingertips is that more people in the country are backing the president, and we're putting some numbers up here on the screen, than those who did under no circumstances would ever vote for him? Do these numbers surprise you? If the election were held today, who would you vote for? Trump at a 40, the Democrat at a 37, undecided at 14.
Yeah, if you look at that, what's omitted is the undecided. The undecided is, not the undecided, the third-party candidates. The third-party candidates in that graphic made up 9% of the vote. If you offer two choices, which a lot of pollsters have done, Joe Biden or Donald Trump, you're going to get one result. But there wasn't a ballot in 2016 that had two choices for president. There are always third-party candidates. And to that point, in 13 states in 2016, the third-party candidates were getting more votes than the difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Right.
The difference in Michigan was 11,000, 250,000 voted third party. The difference in Wisconsin was 23,000. The third party candidates was 153. So you have this big block of people who, if they voted A or B, might have a different outcome than
The fact that you have all these numbers in your head kind of scares me. But on the other hand, on the Democratic side right now, less than 7 months out from the Iowa caucus, Joe Biden is leading the pack by a sizable margin, with Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and Kamala Harris bunched together, as you can see on the monitor there. What's your big takeaway from these numbers, and what should the candidates do next week at their debate? For Joe Biden, his lead is predicated on really a couple of important things. Number one, he's a well-known quantity. Number two, he owns the middle. You've got the progressive left, the middle, and the right. The right really doesn't participate actively in Democratic primaries. But who competes with Joe Biden in the middle? And a lot of the middle in the Democratic Party are older voters. No one's competing for that right now. Nobody's competing in the Democratic field. And then you've got the progressive part of this, which is shared by the other four. So that's a dynamic I think that other candidates are going to have to navigate a little bit better. And so they have a bigger challenge in the debate as far as being able to
because
stand
they're
out.
drawing from the same lane. They're drawing from that progressive left lane.
And the fact that Elizabeth Warren is on a debate, not with many of them, is to her advantage?
It could be. She could make it to her advantage. It's the leadoff debate. And the other part of the Biden strength in those numbers that you showed is the perception that he's the one Democrat who can beat Donald Trump. And if you ask Democrats what their end game is, it's to defeat Donald Trump.
I'm going to put this up on the screen. This is the next graphic I would like to show you. Perhaps this folds into good news for Bill Weld, because 60% of Republicans polled said that they were 60% of Republicans. Let me say that again. Polled said they would like to see a GOP debate. Bill Weld is the only one right now running against President Trump. Is this meat for him with comforting party leaders? Is this
I think so.
For the gristle?
I think so. We asked nationally, people who self-identified as Republican primary or Republican caucus goer, they want to see a debate by a large margin, 2-1. Obviously, Weld doesn't show up in the poll. He gets 5% and Trump gets 90%. But I think a debate would open up the door for some dissident Republicans to have a vessel in Bill Weld.
All right. You ready for the OTR pop quiz?
I am. Here it is.
Here it is in my hand. And just now, this is we're taking
Snatch.
a little creative liberty here. You are
Johnny Carson has nothing on you.
Okay. All right.
So you are a pollster, right?
I think so.
Okay, so we're going to ask you about other famous polls.
Oh, God. The answer is I don't know.
All right. Question one. He was a composer and a virtuoso who wrote primarily for solo piano, was considered a genius of the Romantic era. We have a multiple choice. Can you name him?
What's the multiple
Oh,
choice?
no, they're right there.
They're there. I'm sorry, they're on the screen.
Okay.
Right.
Mendelssohn, Liszt, or Chopin?
Remember, the category is polls.
Category is polls.
B.
C.
Oh,
Chopin.
okay.
Nocturne in E flat major is one of his most famous
okay.
works.
Got it.
We should have had a little bit for you. We could have
That's
played
okay.
it. It would have been
yeah,
a lovely
I would-
sonata.
I was listening to classical music on the
Very
way,
good.
too.
All right, so let's try this one. It is a tall wooden pole that's often decorated. See,
I'm using this in my class.
I told you. We had pole questions.
All right.
It's a tall wooden pole that's often decorated with colorful streamers that people dance around. No multiple choice here. What's it called?
Carousel.
No, really?
Here's
you're
the
wrong.
hint. Give him a you
No,
just
you're
give him
wrong.
a-
It's the maypole.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay,
Again, it's a maypole.
Got it. I was looking at the kids. I was going around. I love it.
We
I got to
continue.
use that in my class.
We continue with the polls with Dave Paleologos. Stay with us.